Hi, everybody. I am Zip. I'm your host for today's webinar. We're going to be covering some updates to Amazon's simple email service, SES. I have some experts with me today, so let's go ahead and show you who's with us today. I'm Zip still. I'm a senior solutions architect, and I specialize with SES and our messaging services here at AWS. I'm joined by Andy Wong. Want to say hi, Andy, and where you
Hi,
at?
everybody. I'm actually in Boston too.
Okay, I think you're right across the hall.
Hi, everybody.
And then I've got Tom Gilbert. Tom comes all the way from.
Everyone. Yep, I'm here in Seattle, Washington.
Excellent. And then Jesse, you are.
Hi, I'm Jesse Thompson, email deliverability manager, and I am in Madison, Wisconsin.
Great. And I've got some other colleagues that are online that will be helping us handle questions and answers from the audience. And if you have any questions, I think there should be a question box somewhere in your interface, and go ahead and ask a question. We're going to do our very best to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. If we can't get to your question, to answer your question, if you provide us with your email address, we'll follow up with you. And with that, why don't we go ahead and talk quickly about our agenda. We've asked Andy to come in and talk a little bit about WorkMail. I don't want to take any of his thunder away, so he's going to talk to us a little bit about WorkMail. We're going to then dive into simple email service, and we'll talk about a couple of key things for the email service. And then we're going to hand it over to Jesse. Jesse's going to talk a little bit about deliverability. I think that's top of mind for many of our clients that are delivering email, especially marketing and promotional email in the age of new bulk sender requirements from Google and Yahoo. And of course, we're going to do our very best to answer your questions. So without further ado, what I think I'll do is turn it over to my friend Andy. Andy, it's all you.
Thanks, Zip. And hi, everyone. My name is Andy Wong. I'm a product manager on the Amazon email team supporting the WorkMail product. Today, I'd like to tell you about WorkMail, a mailbox and calendar service which recently added auto logging features to enhance email security. Traditionally, most customers use SES bulk sending alongside their existing corporate mail systems, and we've seen creative solutions from our customers to combine SES inbound and outbound mails with WorkMail mailboxes. And we hope the introduction today will help illustrate how your employees, freelancers, frontline workers, and call centers can all benefit from mailbox and calendar services with no minimum subscription or bundled text, which integrates seamlessly with the email infrastructure you are already using. Next slide. To begin with, Amazon WorkMail is a managed email and calendaring service designed for businesses. It offers a familiar email experience supporting existing desktop and mobile email clients like Outlook, web browsers, and native iOS and Android email applications. With WorkMail, you can access your email, contacts, and calendars from anywhere, ensuring seamless communication and organization. Now, WorkMail can be integrated with existing corporate directories, making it easy to manage user access and permissions. This integration simplifies the onboarding process and it ensures that your email system is consistent with your existing infrastructure. One of the key benefits of Amazon WorkMail is its strong security controls to help customers maintain a professional email identity with no compromises. And the next slide shows a screenshot of the admin console. WorkMail is scalable to support organizations of any size, from small businesses to large enterprises. It features simple monthly per user pricing and costs $4 per user per month, which includes 50 gigabytes of storage per user. Moving on to the next session, audit logging. It is a feature that enables administrators to monitor, analyze, and maintain compliance by capturing and delivering critical email data. It records a wide range of events, including metadata about messages sent, received, and failed login attempts, as well as configuration changes. Administrators can deliver these audit logs to their preferred AWS services, such as Amazon S3 for long-term storage, Data Firehose for real-time data streaming, or CloudWatch Logs for centralized log management. By leveraging these capabilities, organizations can strengthen their security posture, fulfill regulatory requirements, and gain critical visibility into email activities that underpin their daily operations. To sum up, the flexibility and security control to build your email service without being tied to a single product vendor or to a productivity suite subscription are what makes SES so popular with its customers and ensure that WorkMail works reliably for organizations who just need their mail and calendar to work. With that, please use the QR code for more information and stay tuned for more blog content. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it back to you, Sid.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, and I do want to point out that we've put QR codes down on the bottom, I think right-hand corner of all of your slides. Go ahead and use your camera and pull the QR codes. That's going to take you to specific blog posts on the AWS messaging blog, and you'll find other really great blog posts surrounding the different messaging services in SES and WorkMail on that same blog. So go ahead and use the QR codes. Forgot to give you that slide. Sorry about that, Andy. So the rest of the presentation, we're going to be talking about SES. And although SES is used for a very wide range of use cases, transactional emails such as notifications and those types of things, we're going to focus primarily on marketing and promotional email use cases because that has been very much top of mind in our customers. It's one of the major ways our customers use SES, and it's also an area that's received quite a bit of change in the industry, especially through what we call bulk sender requirements. And we'll spend a fair amount of time talking about that here today. We've also blogged on the subject, and we've done some other webinars, but I think most of the questions we got prior to setting up this webinar were around marketing and promotional emails and delivery. So we'll spend a lot of time there. One of the key things for any of our builder customers, most of our customers who use SES use it from the APIs. They programmatically access the service. We introduced a version of the API, the version 2, a few years ago, and it's been in constant use alongside the version 1 APIs. But it's really important that our customers look to migrate relatively soon to the V2 APIs. That's for a lot of reasons, probably the most important of which is that the V2 APIs are where we're supporting all of these bulk sender changes, the requirements. So things like headers, being able to put the one click unsubscribe, etc. It's also a lot of customer feedback went into the creation of the V2 APIs, and they are a little bit more powerful, a little bit more customizable. They've got a more modern interface, and they're really designed for you to get the very most out of SES. So if you are still using the V1 APIs, they'll continue to work, but you will not be able to get access to some of this new functionality that's necessary for bulk sender requirements. Go ahead and look at the blog post on the version 1 to version 2. And if you have any questions, you can get in touch with your AWS account team, or there are a variety of other ways that you can request some help from us. So please do make sure that you're looking very seriously at upgrading to the V2 APIs in the near term. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to my friend Tom, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the specific capabilities.
Thanks, Sid. So my name is Tom Gilbert. I'm a product manager on the Amazon SES team. And first thing we're going to talk about here is that in the latest version of the V2 APIs, as Zip was telling us about, we now provide the ability to set custom headers when sending emails. So this is a powerful new feature that can help you meet some key requirements that have been introduced this year by the mailbox providers and enable more advanced use cases. So first, the ability to set custom headers is going to allow you to meet the one-click unsubscribe requirements from Google and Yahoo. You can now easily add the list unsubscribe and list unsubscribe post headers to your email. So this gives your recipients a simple way to opt out. Beyond that, the custom header support in SES V2 also enables use cases that require proprietary X- headers. So this could include things like tracking, analytics, or other specialized functionality that relies on custom email headers. With SES V2, you can easily incorporate these without having to manage the raw email content yourself. So overall, these new custom header capabilities make it much simpler to implement the advanced email functionality and meet those evolving industry requirements. So I'd encourage you, I'll post a blog post here where you can learn more about how to leverage this feature in your email workflows. In addition to the custom header capabilities, Amazon SES also recently updated our guided onboarding process to help you achieve fully authenticated email sending. So the SES onboarding wizard now walks you through the key steps to set up proper email authentication. This includes verifying your sending domain identities with DKIM alignments, configuring SPF records for your custom mail from domains, and publishing a basic DMARC policy, at least with a none policy. The wizard provides clear guidance on how to implement these authentication measures directly in the AWS console. We're also now providing an on-demand advisor check you can see on the screen here, powered by the virtual deliverability manager to review identities for any high impact recommendations that you should consider, such as strengthening your DMARC policy or adding additional verified sending domains. Implementing proper email authentication like this is crucial for deliverability in the evolving email landscape. So by automating this process through the SES onboarding wizard, we're trying to make it a lot easier for you to get set up for success. So I'll include another blog post in the chat about our guided onboarding update so that you can see the full capabilities and benefits there. And yeah, then let's see, I'll hand it off to Jesse, I believe.
Thanks. One quick thing on that, Tom. We get a lot of questions about this. This functionality is available at no additional cost, the onboarding, guided onboarding updates, correct?
That's correct. Yep. Yeah. So you can do the on-demand advisor checks for no additional cost in the console. And then if you want to get checks like this on a regular basis automatically, you can activate the virtual deliverability manager in the console where you only pay based on how many emails you send.
Thanks. And the virtual deliverability manager, just as a reminder to a lot of folks, has some additional functionality in there to improve or help improve deliverability overall, right? So there are more checks and there's more dashboards and there's more direct information that folks can get at quite quickly, correct?
Yeah, absolutely right. So the virtual deliverability manager is intended to be like having a deliverability expert like Jesse at your fingertips, somebody looking over your shoulder as you work through your email setup and providing you with recommendations to make sure that your email is going to be more likely at any given time to reach your recipients like intended.
Great. Thank you. And speaking of deliverability experts, we're going to hand this over to Jesse. And Jesse, there are several different areas that you and your team cover. Could you tell us a little bit about your role, and then maybe we can dive into some of those top items. I know we had some additional questions that I'll maybe bring up and we can discuss. So a little bit about you, where you come from, and what we're seeing from the first quarter of new bulk sender requirements, please.
Sure. Yeah, Zip, you're putting me on the spot. Thank you. Yeah, so I'm as an email deliverability manager, our goal is to help all of our customers essentially get their messages delivered to the inbox. But at the same token, we also need to ensure that bad actors, malicious actors sending phishing, companies that are sending unsolicited messages to people that don't want them. We need to make sure that that sort of activity does not occur. So a big part of deliverability is enforcement, making sure that people are sending wanted mail, and so that the mailbox providers who we are sending mail to find the mail that all of our customers find to be acceptable. So what these bulk sender requirements are really just an establishment, an enforcement of what is considered best practices. So the best practices for if all of our senders on SES adhere to the best practices, then all the mail that the mailbox providers are receiving are good, and they're more likely to accept mail from all of our customers. So it enhances the deliverability for everyone when everyone complies with these requirements or these best practices. So the best practices are really is pretty simple. I mean, first, monitor your metrics, monitor your events through your bounces and complaint events using Virtual Deliverability Manager or through the event subscriptions through SNS and Kinesis. And also subscribe to Google Postmaster Tools. Google offers a portal for you, and it also includes an API if you'd like to integrate with their API, where Google will tell you the performance of your domains and your campaigns. So that when recipients are marking messages as spam, that will show up as an elevated complaint rate in Google Postmaster Tools. So what do you do if your complaint rates are high? What it means is essentially that there's a significant portion of your recipient base that is indicating that they did not want to receive the messages. So what you need to do in that case, if your complaint rates are high, is to make it really easy for those recipients to unsubscribe from the messages. Don't make it difficult. Don't put it behind, like restricted web portals. Don't hide it in the bottom of the message where no one can see it. Make it easy, make it visible. So putting a link in an unsubscribe link in the body of the messages is great. That's been considered best practice for a long time. What Google and Yahoo are requiring moving forward is a codification of or an implementation of the RFC 8058, for those of you who want to dig into the technology, but it's essentially adding a link to the header of the messages. And what that enables Google and Yahoo and other mailbox providers to do is to show an unsubscribe option so that the user can just click one click. It removes them from receiving that type of messages in the future.
Can we double click on that for a second? Because I think it's really important. I get a lot of questions about this as well. So first off is there are several blogs that are on the messaging blog that target this very specifically. There's one main blog post that targets bulk sender requirement. A question I think you and I both get often is, well, what entails a bulk sender requirement? Generally speaking, if you're sending more than 5,000 messages to a provider like a Google or a Yahoo a day, and those messages are promotional or marketing in nature, then you'd be considered a bulk sender requirement. That's not to say, however, that these requirements should be ignored by folks that are sending transactional messages, right? So it's one of the first things. The second thing is that we did call them best practices for a long time, right? They are now pretty hardcore requirements. So if you're not adhering to these requirements, your mail is going to suffer deliverability issues with these large providers. And then I think the last thing that I wanted to double click on is that notion of this one click unsubscribe. We've mentioned it a couple times already in this webinar. The SES V2 APIs support it. There's a blog post that's up that talks about how to implement the one click unsubscribe. But it's really, really important to provide the ability to easily unsubscribe. You don't want to make complaining your unsubscribe mechanism, because it really will hurt deliverability, correct?
Yeah, the more complaints you're getting, the worse your deliverability will be in the long term. So if you see any signs of an elevated complaint rate, you should definitely be looking at unsubscribe. Or that's the way that you're building your lists of who you're sending messages to. It's in a later bullet here on the slide here, but one-time passcodes are a pretty common a common thing that get abused. People like a lot of times one-time passcodes are those when you're signing into a web form or confirming a registration for something, that web form will send you a confirmation link to prove that you are who you say you are. Well, if the recipient isn't actually requesting that link, they're going to receive an unsolicited messages unsolicited message, and they're going what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to mark it as spam. So what you want to do is monitor for those the rates of those unsubscribe or those complaint rates. And if you see a sign that you elevated complaint rate on a one-time passcode type thing, that would be an indication that your web form is being abused. And you should put a CAPTCHA on it. You should prevent bots from hitting the page. You should prevent bad actors from putting invalid addresses onto that web page. Because if that type of problem does not get addressed over time, a lot of users might be clicking on spam on your messages, and the anti-spam algorithms that Google and Yahoo and other mailbox providers have. A lot of these algorithms are AI ML driven, and those algorithms will start to learn that recipients don't particularly like that type of message. So those are the types of things that you can do to help prevent that occurring, the elevated complaint rate.
So on
To your earlier question,
go ahead.
though, I wanted to touch on the other two or three questions you asked in there. Classification as a bulk sender really means that you are sending at a high enough volume that you are expected to be aware of the best practices. Not necessarily that all of your messages are considered bulk. Some of the messages you're sending may be considered transactional and may not need an unsubscribe. But then if you are sending messages that could be construed as marketing or promotional in nature or unexpected by the recipient, that would be the scenario where you will be expected to offer an easy unsubscribe option. So there's a little bit of a nuance there. If you're a really small sender, you can probably get away with skirting some of these best practices, but at the very least, the domain alignment authentication requirement is something that you need to be looking at. If you're sending messages from an email address identity in the gmail.com domain, for example, those messages are not going to get to the inbox regardless of what volume you're sending. So if you don't have a domain, you should be getting a domain and aligning the brand of your organization with the domain that you're using, so that recipients, when they see the message, they see it's your domain and your brand, and they can trust it.
That's a great, actually, we had a direct question that was asked prior to the webinar about using email for identities. And that's a really great point. The domain, using the domains is becoming super important, right?
Yes, it is, because it's how the mailbox providers associate reputation. So if you develop a good reputation, your domain will hold that reputation. And if you develop a poor reputation, your domain will hold that reputation. And you're not going to inherit the reputation of anyone else, because those people don't have access to your domain. And that's really what we mean by authentication when we talk about email authentication. It's about authenticating your use of your domain so that the mailbox providers can either trust your messages over time, or they can learn to not trust the messages based on your adherence to the best practices.
Yep, and I can attest that there are some very, very good blog posts on the web on the messaging blog on exactly what to do to ensure that you have domain authenticated identities. So if you have any questions, go ahead and look in the blog. You can look through the documentation, and if you need to, you can go ahead and find several different ways to ask questions of the AWS team. But we do want to make sure that as many folks as possible are adhering to those requirements and using domains to ensure that their mail gets through. What else are we seeing with regard to sort of deliverability and maybe some of the challenges that customers are facing that you can share some answers with?
I think I already covered the one-time passcode thing in detail. Just a reminder to add CAPTCHAs. I know that they're annoying for users on the web, but it's really the best way to protect your mail sending. If you have a form that collects an email address and generates an email, put a CAPTCHA on it, because bots will hit it. They will do bad things against your web forms if they can. So just keep the bots off your web forms. That's the one thing I would like, the one message I would like to tell people. But the third bullet there on the list is the complaint feedback changing. What I mean by that is that well, today if you use VDM or subscribe to the event stream in SES, you're only getting complaints for a subset of the mailbox providers that actually participate in sending spam complaint rates back. Gmail does not send complaints. So it's sometimes a common assumption that customers have, that they'll see one-to-one complaint feedback for every recipient on their list. That's not true. For Gmail, you need to use Google Postmaster tools to monitor that feedback. And what I mean by it changing is that the industry is shifting more towards unsubscribe as the primary mechanism for senders to measure the sentiment of the recipients. In the past, it was heavily reliant on that complaint feedback loop. In the future, it's going to be primarily unsubscribed. So look to implement the unsubscribe as we blog about, and as features become available, in terms of like solutions you can deploy on AWS to accomplish the integration with your upstream architecture. Talk to your AWS account teams if you need help with that sort of architecture. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, so I'm just going to drop it here and let you ask any follow-up questions you might have.
No, that's great. I'm looking through some of the pre-questions that we had. There were a fair number of questions around complaints and handling, complaint feedback, and I think that's one of the misconceptions is you'll get, some indication for every single person that complains. That's not necessarily the case. So you will and should subscribe to the Google Postmasters tool to keep your eyes on what's going on there. It can serve as a bit of a proxy for the other providers if you are sending across a range of email providers. The Google Postmaster tool can serve as a proxy. If you're having complaints in the Google realm, you are most likely having complaints across the broad spectrum of email service providers. Yahoo also has some tools, the Yahoo Sender Hub, right? Has some tools there that can be useful as well. So I think that that's important. And then how are our customers doing? I know you have some metrics. Are most of our customers engaging with these requirements in good position as the one-click unsubscribe requirement comes into view somewhere in the next month or two? What do you folks see? Are you seeing that the requests for help have been calming down and deliverability is where we would expect it to be?
There has been an increase in customers adopting domain identities. For the large part, it hasn't really been an issue for the bulk of our customers, because in order to achieve good deliverability, it's always been a best practice to use a domain identity and send messages that are authenticated. Unsubscribe, it's a little bit more difficult to measure adherence, and I think we've been seeing signs from Google and Yahoo in terms of them, kind of pushing back some of their dates on enforcement, because they know it's a long tail of industry of different senders with legacy infrastructure that may not be able to quickly adapt. So I mean, it's just going to be a process that everyone needs to work through together, and eventually it'll result in a much better situation for all email recipients.
Okay, great.
The one thing that I forgot to mention is that Google in particular is starting to send signals through SMTP throttling to senders that are at risk of having their messages rejected. Those will show up in the event stream, in the SES subscription event stream, as delivery delay events. So if you really want to know if your spam rates with Google are high, and you really want to know if Google is starting to throttle your messages, you should start monitoring for those delivery delay events. But first thing first, go subscribe to Google Postmaster tools, because that's the easiest thing to do.
Yep. And I had several customer calls in the last couple of weeks where I was asked if how does a how does a sender determine if their mail is spammy? And there's no, I mean, there are some hard, fast rules, right? But I guess the answer that we've gotten when we ask the email service providers is like, you should know, right? So the enforcement or the beginning of the enforcement is based on your best practices as a sender, right? Don't send spammy email. Don't send mail to people who don't want it. I mean, I think those guidelines have been in place for a really long time, but they're becoming very, very important too. So that we don't have a hard, fast answer on what makes an email spam, right? I guess if we had that answer and we gave that answer, then all the bad actors would then know exactly how to bypass the gates. And so I think it's a constant sort of shift. Okay, thanks, Jesse. I'm sure we've got some questions in the wings about deliverability. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up to questions. We've had some questions that have come in prior to the webinar, and then I think we have some questions that are coming in now. I did see one comment that some of the QR codes were being obscured by a WebEx logo. We do apologize for that. All of the blogs that we referenced today are available on the AWS messaging and targeting blog. You can tie that into an RSS reader and get alerts when there's an update. We publish a lot of blogs related to these subjects, so it's a good idea to put a reader on there and see the latest stuff that comes out. I'm going to go ahead and ask Andy if he could step back in, because we have a question for Andy around WorkMail. I know that a lot of our SES customers are starting to use WorkMail in a variety of different use cases. We've got a question that came in about WorkMail. Does it have an SDK? So Andy, does WorkMail offer an SDK?
Thank you for the question on SDK. And yes, Amazon WorkMail does provide an administrative SDK, so you can actually natively integrate WorkMail with your existing services. The SDK enables a few things: programmatic user, email group, and meeting room or equipment resource management through API calls. This means your existing IT service management tools, workflows, and third-party applications can automate WorkMail migration and management. And additionally, WorkMail offers an SDK for accessing the content of email messages that are in the process of being sent from or delivered to your organization. So you can use this SDK in combination with the email flow rules to trigger lambdas or mail sending or delivery and access the full message for analysis or integration with other systems. If you want to learn more, feel free to check out our documentation on the API reference section.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Tom, are you there?
I'm here.
Tom, we had a couple of questions, and in fact, I translated a few that came in Spanish and Espanol, which was super fun, around monitoring for SES. Would you mind just giving us a couple of the key ways to monitor SES? That would be, straight monitoring, and also things like VDM, maybe like a, kind of a top bullet point idea.
Yeah, so I guess there are a couple of key ways that you can handle monitoring. I mean, first is in the Amazon SES console. You can see your email sent, your quotas, your mail that's sent, rejected, bounced, complaints. And we also offer the virtual deliverability manager that we mentioned earlier, which provides more granular details and even deliverability information at a per ISP or per mailbox provider level. So that's a powerful tool to check out. Then we have the Get Send Statistics API operation that provides counts for deliveries, bounces, complaints, and rejects. Unfortunately, that doesn't provide all of the available information for the other items. You want to set up event streams so you can configure feedback notifications and event publishing to get your opens, clicks, bounces, complaints, rejects, and failures. So that's kind of at a high level. I did post a couple of documentation links that break that down in more detail in the Q&A feature.
Great, thanks a lot. Hey, Jesse, I think you have some of the audience questions in front of you. Are there any pressing audience questions that you want to tee up for our team? Put everybody on the spot.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of questions in here, and I'm afraid we're not going to get to them because I only have 5 minutes, and I'm trying to digest them all in my head. I do see one about the some of the confusion around SPF and subdomains, and not the main domain. There's a question: is SPF verification only possible with a subdomain and not the main domain? This is a very common question that customers tend to have. So the domain that is used in the from header is what applies to DMARC, and the domain that is what we refer to as the mail from domain is what SPF applies to. SPF authorizes the IP addresses of the infrastructure to send mail as the mail from domain. When you send mail with SES, you're never sending with a mail from domain that is the same as the domain in the from header. So when you set up a custom mail from domain, it's always going to be a subdomain of the domain that you put in the from header. And that is the domain that SPF applies to. So it can be a little confusing, but just think of them as kind of two separate domains. The SPF domain is sometimes what I like to refer to the mail from domain as. That'll always be a subdomain, and you don't need to go and modify SPF for the main domain in your from header.
Great, thanks. I'm going to let you.
A lot of these questions are questions that would be good for support too. Like call AWS support if you have some questions, and your account team as well can answer questions or relay them up as well if we don't get to them today.
Yep, thanks. And a lot of these topics again are covered in blogs, and the blogs all have the ability to comment. So if you don't know where to turn for Q&A, if there's a blog post that's written around that subject, you should be able to use the comment section in the blog post, and we should get that back into our emails, and we can turn around and provide some answers. I did see Depanshu, hope I'm pronouncing Depanshu's name correctly, asked a question about SES suppression lists and how to remove people from the suppression list. That's very well covered in the documentation. So go ahead and just jump into the documentation, Depanshu, and you should see exactly how you can do that with both the console and the V2 API. So the SES V2 API has a delete suppressed destination. You can use that to remove addresses. Okay. Is there any other super pressing question, Jesse, that you see that came in?
I do see a question, a couple questions about email address identities. Just to make it clear, when you verify an email address identity, you are not complying with the bulk sender requirements for authentication unless you also verify that same domain as a domain identity. So that's the main lesson. If you're only using email address identities primarily, especially if you're using a gmail.com identity, you need to be looking towards getting a domain identity. And if you're in a larger institution that maybe has a primary domain, and maybe you're dealing with some bureaucracy in your own organization on the usage of that domain, that would be when I would recommend using a subdomain, so that you would have something affiliated with your department or your use case as a subdomain of your primary domain, and then that would give you some leverage to have a domain to use without necessarily having to ask for your organization to onboard another email sending provider to the primary domain.
Great. Well, I think we're at time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank my experts for coming in and helping us today. I'd like to thank all of our customers and everybody who's considering being a customer, and thank you very much for asking your questions. If we didn't get to your question today, we do apologize, but we've captured those questions, and if we have a way to get them directly to you, we will. We are planning on doing a fairly regular cadence on these types of webinars, And if you'd like us to cover particular subjects, please go ahead and send that in through your AWS account team, or again, you can comment on any of the blogs that we write around these subjects. We're happy to make sure that we target the information directly to you, our customers. So with that, I'm going to wrap things up. I'm going to thank everybody for joining us, and I'm going to wish you a really excellent rest of the week. Thanks. Bye.